Welcome to Real Life Church. I'm Joe. This is my friend
Stacy.
We're so glad that you're here. Just an announcement for next week. Next week is Easter Sunday, so we really want to see you here. At service times are going to be at 9 and 10:30. We would love for you to invite a friend, and our service will be outdoors. I think it'll be beautiful.
Yeah. It's going to be a great day. And church, we are so excited for Easter. We are so excited for the ways that God has been on the move in this season at our church. We are thankful for you. We are specifically thankful for you when you take a step into giving. If you haven't yet done that, you can go to realife.la/give. And we'd love for you to prayerfully consider what it would look like today to say no to those things that you want and yes to what people need, and that is Jesus. So we're going to throw it to Pastor Jim, and we'll see you here in just a minute.
Hey, Real Life Church, it's Pastor Jim, and today we celebrate Palm Sunday, the day that Jesus went riding into Jerusalem for the last week of his life. And I wonder today who in this story we're going to be, because the crowds gathered around and cheered for him. The disciples were nothing but anxiety. The teachers of the law wanted to stop it, and Jesus had things on his mind that was different than what anybody was expecting. Remember, the crowds cheer in celebration, and a few days later have turned on him and are shouting for his crucifixion. It's a curious story. It's strange that things flip the way they do. And so as we approach Palm Sunday, we want to look and make sure we understand what's going on. I have 4 questions to ask as we enter into Palm Sunday. Number 1, what's on the crowd's minds as they gather around and cheer Jesus as he rides into Jerusalem? Remember, this is, they're going in for Passover, for their Independence Day, and they celebrate the fact that God has set them free multiple times. They were in slavery in Egypt, and God set them free. They were in slavery in Babylon, and God set them free. The Greeks ruled over them for a little while, and then God set them free. And now Rome rules over them, and they want freedom again. So as they march into Jerusalem for Independence Day weekend, what they are thinking is, we are going to take the city back. Imagine a city moving into a neighborhood that's crime-ridden and filthy and thinking, we're going to clean this up. Or a young couple buying a new home that's a fixer-upper and thinking, we're going to make this beautiful. Or a team going to a championship and saying, we're going to bring home the trophy. That's the spirit of what's going on in the crowds as they cheer for Jesus. The time has come to take back Jerusalem. Here's how the story goes in the Gospel of John, chapter 12, starting at verse 12. The next day, the great crowd had come for the festival, that had come for the festival, heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. Now, what they're doing here is they're chanting something that they chant every year at this holiday. This is not unusual. This is not just for Jesus. As they march into Jerusalem, they recite what's called the Great Hallel, the Great Praise. They go through Psalms 113 through 118, and they chant them on the way in. And they say things like, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And with palm branches in hand, and that's why they're celebrating. That's why it's Palm Sunday, because that was written into the Psalms. So this is something they always do. But the fact that they're centering it in on Jesus is unique, and it will make the disciples anxious, and it will make the Pharisees mad. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." That's actually a prophecy in Zechariah 9 that didn't make sense until this moment, that the king would come in riding on a donkey. At first, his disciples did not understand all this. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him and that these things had been done to him. The Hallel concludes with, "The stone that has been rejected has become the cornerstone," which was a message that Israel, which was a tiny little nation thrust aside, has become the most important of the nations. But here it applies to Jesus, who, though rejected by the teachers and leaders of his day, who ultimately would be crucified by the people, would become the cornerstone, the foundation of all of faith and life. They sing, "We join the procession up to the altar, and you are our God." And as they sing it, Jesus rides in. What's on their mind is that the time has come to reclaim the kingdom, and they expect Jesus to be the one and go toss Herod off his throne. Second question, what was on the minds of the disciples as they watched this event unfold? They were not nearly as excited as the crowds. One of them had even said, "Let's just go into Jerusalem and die with him." Back in the ancient world, crowns were often made to look like the city walls. There's a kind of crown that ancient kings wore called a coronus muralis, a mural crown. And it actually was shaped like the walls of a city. Because remember, in the ancient world, the idea for a strong city is you build it on top of a hill and you surround it with strong walls. You create this circle of walls around it to protect the people who live inside. And the crown was literally modeled on the walls of the city. It was a miniature version that the king wore on his head of the walls that surrounded a city, the mural crown, the coronus muralis. And the idea here is that the city is always on the king's mind. His life's focus is on the city. His whole life revolves around it. And the Romans know this. The Romans have conquered city after city after city. They know how to come against walls and lay siege to them and conquer cities. They've controlled Jerusalem for some time now. The disciples are nervous because they know in this game, the Romans are going to win. Jerusalem doesn't have the power. Israel doesn't have the power to throw out so mighty a kingdom as Rome. And the Romans' minds are on the city. Jerusalem doesn't have the capacity to overtake them. And so the disciples are nervous about how the Romans are going to respond to everybody celebrating Jesus coming into Jerusalem and chanting, "The King of Israel, the King of Israel," because Herod is the King of Israel appointed by Rome. And as they sing this to Jesus, this is a threat to Roman power. They know what Rome does to traitors and insurrectionists. Rome crucifies them on the side of the road. And the disciples are right. The only crown that Jesus will end up wearing in this story is a crown of thorns in the end. The disciples are nervous. The Pharisees around them tell the crowds to be quiet, tell them to stop chanting. And Jesus says, if they stop chanting, the rocks will cry out. Because what they're saying is simply true. Thirdly, what was in Jesus' mind on Palm Sunday? He rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, a sign of his humility. The crowds cheer for his kingship. The disciples are anxious because of the threat it poses to Rome and the threat Rome poses to them. Jesus' mind seems to be on something completely different. Because Jesus had taught the people about kingdom all along. Kingdom was his favorite word. It was the subject he talked about all the time. His most important and most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, is all about trading the kingdoms of this world for the kingdom of God. It begins, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And the center point, the pivot of the Sermon on the Mount, is the center of the Lord's Prayer. "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Jesus is all about kingdom. And he means for the people to exchange the kingdoms of this world to take on the kingdom of heaven. What the crowds want is a kingdom of this earth. They want to take Jerusalem back. They want a kingdom that is theirs. And Jesus is talking about a different kingdom entirely. It's like something a friend of mine did to his daughter when she was a little girl. He played this little prank on her when she was little and was learning words. And He called chicken steak and steak chicken. When he'd serve chicken for dinner, he'd say, "Here, honey, have a steak." And so she came to call chicken steak. And when he'd serve steak, he'd say, "Here, honey, have chicken." And she came to call steak chicken. And all this was just his little joke on her, his funny little routine, until one day they went to a restaurant and his daughter ordered chicken. And the waitress brought her chicken. And she said, "I ordered chicken." And the waitress says, "That isn't chicken." And the waitress says, "That is chicken." And the little girl says, "This isn't chicken, this is steak." And that's how she figured out that dad had been playing a game with her all along. It's not a wise thing to do. Don't do this to your kids. I'm sure she ended up with all kinds of eating disorders. But this is what Jesus is doing with kingdom. The people say, "We want a kingdom." And Jesus says, "I come to bring you a kingdom." And they said, "Right, a kingdom with a kingdom and walls and armies. And we go fight the other kingdoms. We throw the other kingdoms out." And Jesus says, "No, no, no. A kingdom in which we love our enemies, in which we forgive those who have wronged us, in which we stop chasing money, in which we surrender power and go to the cross and give our lives for the sake of love." And the crowd say, "That's not a kingdom." But that's what's on Jesus' mind as he rides into Jerusalem. The people are cheering for him because they see him as an ally, but they are not his friends. I realized a few years ago there's a difference between allies and friends. At first they look the same. Allies and friends will both cheer for you when you're doing what they want. But when you change what you're doing and when you stop doing what your allies want, your allies stop cheering for you. They stop standing beside you. They walk away. A friend will stay beside you regardless, because the friend is not in it for what they get out of it. The friend is in it for you. An ally is only in it for what they get out of you. There's a difference between allies and friends. And on Palm Sunday, the crowds look like Jesus' friends, but they are only his allies. I talked to a pastor some time ago who had just retired, and he said before they retired, they brought in a new pastor to work alongside him, a younger guy, and he was charismatic, and he was a great preacher, and people liked him, and then he retired. And he said, "Jim, you will be stunned at how quickly they forget you." And it's because they were not his friends, they were his allies. On Palm Sunday, the question that comes to us is, are we going to be Jesus' friend or are we going to be Jesus' ally? Because the kingdom that the crowds are cheering for is not the kingdom that Jesus has in mind. So fourthly, I come to the question, what's on your mind on Palm Sunday? What's on your mind as you cheer for Jesus? Together as a church, we're reading a book called Practicing the Way by a pastor named John Mark Comer. And in it, he says, we've lost the sense of apprenticeship that discipleship really entails. When we say we're followers of Jesus, we think that it means we get the right facts in our head and we attend church occasionally. He says that's not what discipleship is. Discipleship is apprenticeship to Jesus, where we learn the ways of Jesus and imitate Jesus and spend time with Jesus and grow in intimacy with Jesus and become like Jesus. We've forgotten what it means to be disciples. It's kind of like something that happened at Oregon State University back in the 1960s. In 1967, a student started coming to class wearing a black bag over his entire body. You could see his bare feet, but that was it. He wore a black bag over his entire body. And he'd walk into class and he'd sit in class and listen to the lectures like the other students. And people looked at him and thought, well, this is weird. But eventually they just settled into accepting it as normal. This student wearing a black bag covering his entire body so you couldn't tell who it was. They just accepted it as normal. That was the black bag student who just came to class. Well, we've accepted as normal an image of Jesus that isn't Jesus. We've accepted as normal an image of discipleship that isn't discipleship. We like a Jesus that we can go running to when we're sad or when we're sick or when we're in financial need. And he comforts us and takes care of us and gives us a quick fix so that we can run back to our self-indulgent lives. And that's not the kind of kingdom that Jesus has in mind. That's not what discipleship is. When Jesus calls us, he doesn't say, I want you to get all the facts straight and go to church on Sundays. He says, I want you to follow me. And he teaches his disciples to pray this prayer in the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, in which we say, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us what we need for today. This was a throwback to when the Israelites were wandering through the desert and God made bread rain from the sky when they didn't have any other food. Trust God to give you enough for today, and that's it. Give us this day our daily bread. Don't worry about tomorrow, Jesus says on the Sermon on the Mount. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Just pray, give us this day our daily bread. And then forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, which was a throwback to the celebration of Jubilee, when all debts were canceled. Every 50th year, all Jewish people canceled all debts, all land went back to its original owners, everything went back to zero, everything was forgiven. And Jesus here means it in terms of our relationships with other people. Forgive us all of our wrongs as we forgive all wrongs. Nobody owes us anything in return. We cancel their debts. Lord, please cancel our debts. And that was the vision of the kingdom that Jesus had in mind. And it is radically different than what most Christians in America are chasing after when they think about Christian discipleship. Jesus calls us to kind of discipleship, to a kind of kingdom that's different than what the world has to offer. So what do you think about when you cheer for Jesus? What kind of kingdom do you have wrapped around your mind as you go following after him? Because Jesus says, come follow me. And when he says that, he means for us to leave behind the pursuit of money, the pursuit of status, the pursuit of power, and the pursuit of revenge. And all those come as great promises to us. Leave behind the pursuit of money and all its anxiety and insecurity and exhaustion that comes with it. Stop chasing after things that don't feed you and let me rain down bread from heaven. Let me take care of you. Stop chasing after status and the desire to have standing in this world with all its insecurity and ego. It'll leave you hungry anyway. It will not satisfy you. In my house, you're the child of a king. That's the only status that you need. Leave behind your pursuit of power. Stop fighting with each other. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. If you trust in me, I will place in you my spirit, which will give you a supernatural power that is like no other. And leave behind your pursuit of revenge. Cancel all debts, because I am canceling yours when I go to the cross. That's what it means to follow after Jesus. That's the kind of kingdom he was coming to build. That's what he wanted. And we can either be like the crowds and gather around and cheer because we think he's going to give us an earthly kingdom. Or we can be like the teachers of the law that day and think this isn't going to go well. Or the disciples and say, surely Jesus has got this wrong. This isn't gonna work. But what Jesus wants is not allies. He wants friends. People who love him for him because of who he is. And when we do that, if we wrap his kingdom around our minds and live for nothing else, his kingdom will come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And in the end, his will be the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. God bless you. Go be the church.
Well, thank you, Pastor Jim, for that message, and happy Palm Sunday.
Yes, happy Palm Sunday. You are being prayed for and cheered for. If there's anything we can do for you, send us an email, info@realife.la. We will see you on Easter.